Hey class, this week we are exploring the learning outcome for our course that says, discuss controversial issues in literature for children, including issues of censorship. And so to help us get there, to help us get into those conversations, we're going to finish Russell chapter 2. So it's page 39 through, 39 through 51. And this section is includes social diversity and inclusion, transition and tragedy, so death, war, divorce, bibliotherapy, and intellectual freedom. Now there is one sort of subheading in here that I regret not plucking out. I feel like it should have been in last week's book recommendation discussion. So you are going to have a very short book recommendation discussion surrounding, on page 40, the physically, emotionally, and intellectually challenged. And the thing is, I wanted last week's discussion to be really celebratory of different cultures and worlds outside of our own, and to emphasize underrepresented people groups in the book publishing industry, like is expressed in our course learning outcomes. It seems like it's wise to do that, to keep that spirit of celebration and of awareness as we have like a short breakout discussion about the physically, emotionally, and intellectually challenged. And I have some really exciting, I think, like some really beautiful books to recommend there as well. Technically, sexual preference and gender identity also falls into the category of underrepresented people groups. And yet, in our current contemporary moment, it seemed more fitting to place this into the conversation around controversial issues in literature for children, because this is not coming just from my own gut, but if we look at Banned Books Week, which was launched in 1982, but is alive and well today, there is a growing trend of books being banned right now for two main reasons. And one is sexual identity, sexual and gender identity, and the other is issues of race and race and ethnicity and conflict and political type stuff. So it just makes more sense to include the sexual identity stuff in the controversial issues discussion. Now, all of us are different, so some of you will read these things, these subheaders in the rest of Russell's text. You'll look at the resources for this week, and you might think, why is this controversial? And you're just comfortable with all kinds of literature. But it's more likely that there are books out there for children and it would be different for each of us, but that would make us feel uncomfortable. So we might think, I would never share that book in a classroom, or I would never show that to my child, or that book is fine, but for 12-year-olds, or whatever it might be. And we broke into that a little bit when we looked at the problem novel last week. But I do hope that wherever you guys are at, that you will sort of like set aside your own discomfort and just open your mind and try. My recording cut out there for a second. Set aside your own discomfort. In fact, I would strongly encourage you, for the sake of learning, to, this is my personality, but like find the thing that makes you uncomfortable and go headfirst into it, just to see if you can grow. I mean, maybe you'll just grow in feeling more convicted about what you feel convicted about. But here's the scenario that I'd like to give you if you are struggling with some of these controversial issues or controversial texts. I talked to an administrator and asked him the question in town, well, with Common Core and curriculum standardization, is it even important anymore to be equipping like future teachers, for instance, to choose and defend a controversial text? Because are you going to put one of these books at the center of your curriculum, or aren't other people choosing your books for you? And he said, yeah, the curriculum is selected usually by committees, and he said we typically avoid really challenging books for those main units, but a teacher has a bookshelf in their classroom. And so he said that's where you're going to find the more challenging books, the ones that might make certain families feel uncomfortable, but also make other families feel acknowledged and welcomed. And he said, beyond that, it's awesome when a teacher can be a resource for a family, maybe in a teacher-parent conference. And so I don't know if you've heard of the book, but there's a picture book called And Tango Makes Three about penguins at the zoo who pair up. And it's like, and every, I think, anyway, like this time comes and all the girl penguins meet the boy penguins and they make families, and these two boy penguins don't, they're not interested until they find each other, and they do everything together, and it's how they develop a family. And so you might be like, well, I would never put that in the center of a unit, but the administrator who I talked to was saying it's really helpful, again, when teachers are a resource and they know that those books exist, because maybe you have a child in your classroom who has two dads and they're feeling out of place. They're feeling like they don't belong because their family isn't like other people's families. Well, you're having a teacher-parent conference. You can say, oh, I found this really beautiful book called And Tango Makes Three, which celebrates the makeup, the ingredients of your family, and maybe your child would be comforted by the storyline. So that's just one example. And again, you don't have to personally feel comfortable in order to be a resource for that kind of book recommendation. And I encourage you to maybe do some of that role playing, like can you apply everything we've learned thus far about positive social attitudes? So maybe there are themes in these challenging books like friendship and family and love and perseverance that we all can value. Or maybe there are literary elements that are just beautifully done. So plot, characterization, conflict, complexity, style, tone. Maybe the artwork is stunning, and then it's, now we're representing an underrepresented group and dealing with controversial issues, but in a way that creates a mirror and a window and a sliding glass door, and it's not just an agenda, it's not just trying to agitate people. So see if you can find some books like that. And Tango Makes Three is an example of one that has to do with sexual preference, gender identity, diverse family makeup. But the other themes, just to give you a hint of what's to come, are divorce and death. Gosh, so much death in children's literature. War and violence. I found a really beautiful book that fascinated me on the shelf of a children's bookstore that actually had to do with the story of a family crossing the border after their father is killed in a conflict, and it's basically illegal immigration. So it's really contentious. But again, ask yourself, does the book have positive themes about childhood in it? Is it quality literature based on literary elements and visual elements? Is there a chance that knowing of this book could be helpful to a family who's going through something that, again, window, mirror, sliding glass door? I'm not trying to push any of my own beliefs or ideas about about what kinds of books as a society we should prize in the realm of children's literature and what kind we should recommend. What I am trying to push is for you to entertain the idea that maybe you can expand your own horizons, and maybe you can provide something to a child who is different from you if you can abandon your comfort zone a little bit. And just a side note, like nerdy side note, when I was prepping for this over the summer, I read this amazing article scholarly article about the research that has been done about death in children's literature. And it talked about, they looked at how characters die and which character dies, and how children respond when they see the death versus when they just hear about the death, and when the Mufasa father comes back in the spirit form and speaks to the child, and they're just researchers, psychologists especially, are trying to understand the role that literature plays in facilitating child development surrounding these tragedies, because at the end of the day, you guys know this, childhood is not easy. It is a really special, beautiful, precious time, but it is also dark and scary and difficult and sometimes traumatizing. And books play a role in that. So I'm babbling at this point. I want you to check out the instructions and the discussions for more detail, but I wanted to give this short rant to you guys. And if you have a hard time with anything in this week's materials, please send me an email and let's talk about it. I hope you'll feel open enough to let me know if you're struggling in any way. It would be very enlightening to me if you did share that stuff and just kind of talked through your thoughts. But I hope you guys enjoy the chance to do something outside of your comfort zone. I hope you find some incredible books to talk about and share with each other this week.